it's not so simple, and they are doing the process usually in a rational way. But sometimes the employers, they tend to avoid those quarrels and the engagement from the side of the authorities, and they tend to tolerate some small quantity of people doing relatively little for the firm, lazing on a job. So sometimes they can really tolerate a couple of people who are lazing on a job because they don't want to have a quarrels with l'inspecteur du travail. This is the main reason. It's not that these quarrels, this talks with the inspecteur du travail cannot be resolved to the favor of the employer, but they are just a nuisance, so they want to avoid it. Maybe that's the reason why the French are sometimes perceived as lazy. The other reason is because the French are treated, and they treat themselves as if they cannot decide if they are a northern or a southern nation. So they are a little bit like the Germans, with whom the northern part of the France is bordering, and they also have part of their national character is more Italian-like. Most of the industry is in the north, but in the south there's a slightly different culture going on. So for that reason, France, and also because France have used in a very productive way, much more productive than, for instance, the British have used it, the money from the Marshall Plan after World War II. So there were relatively many people with money in the early 1960s, and it turned out that it's possible for anyone to have their private car. So they have started this fashion of going south to the south for a vacation. And in France you can go for a vacation to your own country, because you have basically, although it's not a very large country, it is relatively big, and that's why it has two climate zones, which is not typical for Europe. Maybe only Ukraine, from a European nation, and very large nations like Russia have their own, like, two climate zones, big enough to have two climate zones. The French have two climate zones, and that's why they don't have to go to the vacation to another country. So only if they want to épargner a little bit, to spare a little bit, they would go to the Costa Brava in Spain. But they are not forced to, like for instance people who are living in a country which are totally cold, with cold weather. The multiculturalism as a problem, as the drawback of the French culture, was also mentioned. The French were relatively good up to the 1960s with assimilation of people of different cultural and national backgrounds and so on, because the French nation is also based on the idea of the vertu républicaine, which is very similar to the American creed set of ideas. So it's mostly on the rules and not only on your cultural background. I mean, the nation is based more on the rules and the law and the laws and customs, and not so much on the cultural background, on the nationality. But of course with the Muslims there is assimilation problems started to appear, of course. That the French have produced low quality cars, I would disagree. For instance, Peugeot and Citroën, this is the same factory, it's called PSA, and the main competitor is Renault. Renault is very good with when it comes to security during the accident, because this is a state-owned factory, and they can spend for as many crash tests as they choose. So that's why the cars are very safe. And when it comes to quality, PSA is probably better. The Peugeots and the Citroëns are very decent motor cars, I would say. Far better than Italian ones. Maybe it's like the Italian army, that we confuse Italian army performance with the French army performance. We confused the quality of Italian cars with the French cars. The French cars are made also for the winter, because the French can also experience winter. Most of the problems with the Italian cars comes from the fact that they are produced for